Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, True Crime and Felines. For my returning subscribers, welcome back, my feline friends. For those of you who are new here, my name is Brandy, and every Friday I bring you a true crime case or mystery with one or more of my 14 felines, who are just kind of hanging out weirdly right now, like right off camera, of course. They're all like over here. It's so weird. Look. Anyway, I hope my videos are entertaining for you enough to stick around and become a feline friend. So, this week's case, I actually was reading just somebody's blog online. I thought I was reading a supernatural story because I'm into that stuff too. And then this story took a whole other twist that I was not expecting. So I went out and I did a little bit more research on this story, and holy moly, there was so much more to the story that the blog didn't share. And I'm so excited to bring it to you because I want to talk about this story. It is just unbelievable. So let's get started. So we're going to start this story with the Andrews family. So Brian Andrews was living in Townsend, Massachusetts with his two daughters, Annie, who was 15, and Jessica, who was 8 years old. Unfortunately, the family had recently lost their mother to cancer. So they were just trying to cope without her. Brian was a bus driver, and so he was picking up extra shifts now that he was the main supporter for the family. So when the girls would come home from school, they usually spent a lot of time with each other with their father not home. So during this time, Annie was sort of forming this friendship with this boy named Daniel. Now, Daniel had called the house one day and to talk to Annie and stated that he got her number from one of their mutual friends, but he actually went to a different school. Daniel would tell Annie that he was popular, got good grades in school, he was a football star, he was blonde, blue-eyed, just an overall good-looking guy that everybody wants to date, apparently. Annie was, of course, intrigued and looked forward to their phone calls. One day, Daniel decided that they should go out on a date and meet face-to-face. So he offered to stop by her house, pick her up, and take her out for ice cream. Annie was very enthusiastic about this date. However, when the time came, so when Annie first laid eyes on Daniel standing on her front porch, she was disappointed. This took place in the 1980s, so pretty much Daniel had catfished Annie before catfishing was a thing. Before her, instead of standing a blue-eyed, tall, blonde, good-looking boy, stood a shorter, a little overweight, face full of acne, dark, greasy-haired boy, and he claimed his name was Daniel. It was obvious he wasn't a football star either. Now, Annie felt that she couldn't really shoo him off her porch, so she reluctantly agreed to go get ice cream with him. From the start, Daniel would act a little awkward and made Annie feel uncomfortable. At some point, Annie told Daniel that she had lost her mother to cancer, and this intrigued Daniel, and he started asking her all these questions about her mom that bordered on the morbid. Daniel kept asking Annie about her mom's death, including, did she suffer when she died, and once she was dead, what did she look like? Annie would end up excusing herself from the date early and leaving Daniel feeling rejected, as she made it very clear she did not want a second date and she did not want him to ever call her again. Now, a little bit about Daniel. Daniel LaPlante was born May 15th in 1970. Daniel lived in Townsend, Massachusetts with his mother and his stepfather and two brothers. Now, unfortunately, Daniel had the worst childhood from the word go. He was constantly bullied at school, and he suffered abuse at home. At school, his classmates would think he was weird, and they would refuse to be his friend due to lack of hygiene. The abuse he suffered at home was physical, psychological, and sexual. It is reported that both his biological father and his stepfather had sexually abused him, but it didn't stop there. Daniel would end up being diagnosed with dyslexia and hyperactivity disorder. And as a teenager, the school recommended that he start seeing a therapist to help him through his problems. So his parents signed him up, and he started seeing this therapist. Unfortunately, instead of the therapist helping him, the therapist started grooming him and would eventually sexually abuse Daniel as well. And this would go on for over a year. So unsurprisingly, Daniel's mental state was worse now than it ever was before. Now, due to all of this trauma from all the abuse that he suffered at school, at home, and now at his therapists, Daniel would start to act out, and he would begin criminal activity. It started simple at first. He would break into people's homes and just steal random things. But stealing things wasn't enough. He started playing games where he would subtly move things and make people think that somebody's been in their house, but not make it completely obvious. So he was starting his own psychological torment on his neighbors. Now, it's hard to tell by my research, but there's two reasons that Daniel ended up with Annie Andrews' phone number. The first theory on this is that he thought that the number he had was to a house that he had previously burglarized, and he was calling that house to further torment the people living in it. When he realized that Annie, who was his age, lived there, his goal changed to talk to her. It's also believed that Daniel could have previously broke into the Andrews' house, saw pictures of Annie, and then got her number to try to start a relationship with her. But regardless, they would end up on this horrendous date, and Annie would reject Daniel. Now, they're not too long after this date gone wrong with Daniel, Annie and her sister Jessica were at home alone, like they usually were, and grieving over their mother, they decided to do a seance to see if they could reach the spirit of their mother, just to ask if she was okay. So they performed this seance, and nothing out of the ordinary really happened. But a couple days after the seance, strange things started happening in the house. There was tapping and knocking coming from different parts of the house. The lights would flicker and lights would go on and off a lot of the times. Items would be moved around, or they would simply just come up missing. There was one instance that Annie talked about where she got a plate of food and she set it on the table and left the room to go to the bathroom. She was gone for about 5 minutes, and when she came back, her plate of food was gone, and she never found it. She would ask her sister Jessica about it, but Jessica was on the couch eating her own plate of food, and Jessica stated she didn't see anything and didn't move the food. Now, due to all of this activity in the house, the girls started to think that maybe during their seance, they did reach their mother or something and let something through from the spirit world. However, as the tapping and the knocking and other things became too much to bear, they became scared. So they ended up telling their father exactly what they did. However, Brian didn't really believe them. None of this would happen when he was home, so he was not a witness to any of these weird things. Brian just thought the girls were going through a phase, or this is the way their grief was coming out over their mother. So he told them to pretty much straighten up and stop this nonsense. A couple nights later, the girls heard a knocking coming from the basement. Annie, being brave, grabbed a knife from the kitchen and decided, we're going to check this out and figure out what this is. So they made their way down to the basement following the noise. Once they got to the basement, they then screamed and were shocked to see writing in red on the wall that said, "I'm in your room, come find me." The girls call their dad and he immediately comes home. He calls the authorities and they check it out. The cops figure that the writing in red that looks like blood is actually ketchup. The cops comb through the house and find nothing, and again, Brian accuses the girls of attention seeking. Brian stated he was going to send them to therapy because obviously they were having a problem getting over their mother's death. After that incident, for about a week, nothing happened and the noises seemed to go away. However, in December 1986, the girls are home alone once again and the knocking starts up again. This time it's coming from the upstairs. Annie and Jessica decide to check it out, and as they walk up the stairs, there's a mirror in the hallway, and on the mirror it says, "I'm back, come find me." The girls ended up running to the neighbors and refused to go back into the house. They didn't want to call their dad at first because they figured he'd be mad, which he was, but the neighbors ended up calling their dad anyway. So their dad came home, and again he was angry, and he decided he was going to walk through the house by himself to show the girls that nothing was going on. However, when Brian first entered the house, things seemed a little off that he thought his girls would not do. Like, all the TVs in the house were on and blaring volume. He walked up the stairs and he saw the writing on the mirror. And as he was looking at the mirror, something from his peripheral got his attention. He saw movement, and when he turned his head, inside Annie's room stood a figure dressed in Brian's wife's wedding dress, wearing a blonde wig, and on Annie's mirror was written, "Marry me." As the stranger turned, he was holding an axe. He would try to attack Brian, but Brian was able to escape and flee the house. He immediately called authorities. The authorities came and searched the house and again could not find any stranger. However, one of the cops moved a dresser in Annie's room and found a small crawl space. When they opened the crawl space door, there they saw the stranger hiding. That stranger would end up being Daniel LaPlante. Daniel ended up being arrested and taken down to the police station. So authorities would search the crawl space and realize that Daniel could move throughout the house using the walls. Now, this is an older house, so, the space between the walls are bigger. He was actually able to move about the house in between the walls. As they followed his path through everything, they ended up down in the basement where they pulled out the dryer, and they found a hole in the wall where they saw that Daniel had a sleeping bag, some beer cans, and some food wrappers. So obviously he had been staying there. There was also some clothes that the girls said were missing with various body fluids on them. So for 2 months, Daniel had been tormenting these girls, all because Annie rejected him. It was also reported that the family began finding little holes in the wall that Daniel would most likely use as peepholes to spy on the family. Now, Daniel ended up being placed in a juvenile facility for about 10 months. Fortunately, this nightmare ended for the Andrews family and no one was hurt. Unfortunately, Daniel's little crime spree and psychological games were not done yet. In October of 1987, it was decided that Daniel should actually be tried as an adult for his crimes since he was 17 years old. When that happened, he was moved from the juvenile facility to an adult jail, and in doing so, he became eligible to be bailed out. So his mother put up $10,000 to bail him out of jail. Daniel then went back home to live with his mother and stepfather. Now, within about a month after he was bailed out of jail, Daniel went right back to robbing homes. In one robbery on a neighbor's house, he was able to actually obtain 2 handguns. In December of 1987, 2 months after Daniel was bailed out of jail, Priscilla Gustafsson was found dead in her home by her husband who had come home from work. Priscilla was a nursery school teacher and she was pregnant. She also had 2 small children, Abigail, who was 7, and William, who was 5. Priscilla lived almost directly behind Daniel's parents' house through a wooded area about a half mile. Priscilla had been shot in the head twice, and she was sexually assaulted. Her children, unfortunately, were found dead as well. One was drowned in an upstairs bathroom, and the other was drowned in the downstairs bathroom. Abigail also had blunt force trauma to her head. Now, police had their suspicions. They really thought that Daniel had something to do with this due to just his recent crimes and him being out of jail. So authorities would drop in on Daniel's house, and while they were talking to his mother on the front porch, they would witness Daniel running from his parents' house and disappearing into the wooded area. For 2 days, Daniel was on the loose, and everybody in town was on edge. The police even contacted the Andrews family, who was in the middle of trying to move away from the town, and told them that Daniel was on the loose. Brian Andrews would end up spending the next 2 nights sitting on his porch with a loaded gun to protect his daughters. Now, while Daniel was on the run, he ended up a couple towns over from Townsend, where he would carjack a woman, hold her at gunpoint, and kidnap her, but she was able to eventually escape and run. So she called authorities and told them that her vehicle was stolen, so they started looking for Daniel in this vehicle. Daniel quickly abandoned the vehicle. Finally, after 2 days, a tip came in where someone spotted Daniel staying in a lumber yard. A huge police presence would descend on the lumber yard, including a helicopter in case Daniel ran again. They would end up finding Daniel hiding in a dumpster. They would pull him out and slap the handcuffs on him. And while they were handcuffing him, Daniel was said to just be laughing hysterically. After Daniel's arrest, forensics would find a wealth of evidence that Daniel was in fact responsible for the Gustafsson's family deaths. They would find a hair on one of Daniel's socks that matched 7-year-old Abigail. The bullet casings from the home where Priscilla was shot matched the gun that Daniel had on his person when he was arrested, which happened to be one of the guns that he stole from his neighbor's house. And even though DNA was just in its infancy at the time in the late 80s, they were able to match Daniel by being a type A secretor. Now, what that means is that not only your blood puts off type A, but other bodily fluids like saliva would put off type A as well. There was a beer can beside Priscilla's bed, and they were able to get saliva off of it, which matched Daniel's type A. And they had a lot of semen on the blankets in Priscilla's room that they were able to test as well, and it came back type A. Now, in November, a month before Priscilla and the children's murder, their house had been broken into, and they were robbed. And the items that they claimed were taken were found in Daniel's room at his parents' house as well. So fortunately, Daniel wasn't going anywhere, and he couldn't be bailed out of jail this time. So in October of 1988, about a year after the murder, Daniel's trial began. Daniel never showed any remorse throughout the trial and had a smile or smirk the entire time. He just didn't take anything seriously. The defense tried to plant reasonable doubt in the jury's minds by saying that the items that were stolen may have been found in Daniel's room, but it could have been the stepfather or the brothers that did it and planted it in Daniel's room. However, the other evidence was so overwhelming, plus his stepfather and his two brothers had solid alibis for the time of the murder. Daniel ended up being found guilty and sentenced to 3 life sentences to be served consecutively without the possibility of parole. But due to a new law in the state that was introduced a couple years after Daniel's sentencing, it's known as a second chance law. Basically, if a crime was committed by a juvenile or somebody under 18, no matter how bad it was, and no matter if they were being tried as an adult or not, essentially these people have to be given some sort of chance for parole eventually. So basically what they are saying is that it was deemed unconstitutional to lock somebody up so young and throw away the key because there's a possibility they could be rehabilitated. So a couple years later, Daniel went to court to change his sentencing to become a part of this second chance law. Daniel would speak at the hearing stating this: "I do not have the words to fully express my profound sorrow, but I am truly sorry for the harm I have caused. From the very essence of who I am, from the depths of my soul, I am sorry." However, nobody believed him. He was stone-faced, did not make eye contact, and was very monotone as he read it. A therapist who had recently assessed Daniel right before this particular trial would testify that Daniel was not remorseful and he was not rehabilitated, and that he was just putting on an act. However, the judge ended up defaulting his sentence based on the law at the time, which included this second chance law. So his sentence was changed that he still had to serve 3 life sentences consecutively, but after 45 years, he would be eligible for parole. While serving his sentence, Daniel has been a headache for the prison board. In the year 2000, he requested that he be segregated from the other prisoners because they were threatening him and he felt his life was in danger. His request was approved, and he was segregated from the general population. However, he would then turn around and state that his rights were being infringed upon because he couldn't use the prison library. Now, the reason why he wasn't allowed to use the prison library is because he was segregated. When you're segregated, you lose some rights. However, he kept fighting it, and the prison board awarded him $450 because his rights were being denied. After that, at some point, someone sent mail to Daniel in prison and included pictures or magazines, and they were pornographic. Well, that is contraband in prisons and not allowed. And if you don't know, they open the mail and they confiscate any contraband. Well, Daniel was very upset about it and threw a fit that his pornographic material was confiscated by the prison, and again said it was against his rights, blah, blah, blah. However, that rule was not changed due to obvious reasons, and he lost that one. In 2013, Daniel made claims that he wasn't allowed to properly exercise his faith. Now, apparently, Daniel became Wiccan at some point, and he stated that he required ritual oils that included dragon's blood, black opium, and honeysuckle, and a carrot cake for some reason. And by refusing him these items, they were infringing on his religious beliefs. Now, after the prison talked to some, real Wiccans, the Wiccans told him, you don't need these things to practice the faith. So his claim was ignored. Now, in 2019, Daniel was back in court trying again at the second chance law. What his lawyers presented was that they were asking the judge to change his sentence to make him eligible for parole after serving 30 to 35 years of his sentence. Now, if granted, this would put him eligible for parole immediately because by 2019 he had served 31 years of his sentence. Thankfully, the court came back and said, no way. Not gonna happen. And again, a therapist stated, I don't think he can be rehabilitated. He still has no remorse after all this time. Now, however, because of that first time he tried for the second chance law, they changed it where he is eligible for parole after 45 years. So Daniel will be eligible for parole in the year 2032 when he's 62 years old. Let's hope they deny it. Now, look, I am all for rehabilitation of criminals, and I do believe that some people can change. However, I don't think Daniel is one of those people. He had years of every type of abuse that you can think of, which made him incapable or unwilling to feel anything towards another human being, or anything living for that matter. This makes him very dangerous and unpredictable. The sad part is, if Daniel did not suffer this abuse and had a normal childhood, would he still be this criminal, this psychopath, or would he be a productive member of society? It goes back to the age-old question of, is a killer born or are they made? Now, I do believe in both scenarios. I do believe somebody just can be born terrible, but for all the cases that I've studied, I've seen them made, and it's because of childhood trauma or abuse that has gone on in their lives. But what are your thoughts on this case? I would love to discuss it with you in the comments down below. If you would like to become a feline friend, please hit that subscribe button, and we will be back for you next Friday with another true crime case or mystery. I hope you enjoyed today's case. Thank you guys. I'll see you later. Bye.